Hello, I am Allison Gordon Wright, and I am one of the immigration attorneys here at Villafranca Law. Today, I want to talk with you about naturalization or applying for U.S. citizenship. So, there are lots of requirements to be able to naturalize or apply for citizenship. And today, we're just going to go over them at a high level. But I want to make sure that you have accurate information about what the process and the steps to apply for citizenship are. So, let's get into it. First, you have to be a lawful permanent resident. So when people say, "Oh, I want to be a U.S. citizen," not just anyone can apply, right? You have to have your residency, have your green card, and be a lawful permanent resident. If you're interested in obtaining residency, getting on that path, we have lots of other videos by both myself and Kaylani, and we can talk to you about that process and about what that looks like. But that's the first thing to know is you have to be an LPR, as we call it in the world of immigration attorneys, a lawful permanent resident. So for most people, you have to have been a lawful permanent resident for 5 years in order to be able to apply for citizenship. Now, I say for most people because there are some other ways to be able to apply for citizenship more quickly. For most, the most common kind of quicker path to citizenship we see is for lawful permanent residents who are married to US citizens. They can actually apply for citizenship in 3 years instead of five. So, 3 years as a lawful permanent resident, married to a US citizen throughout those 3 years, living with their US citizen spouse throughout those 3 years, they can apply sooner than the 5 year requirement for most folks. But like I said, for most people, it's going to be 5 years as a lawful permanent resident. Um, and you have to have obtained that lawful permanent resident status lawfully, right? So, um, actually, most people aren't always aware that at your naturalization interview, it's likely you're asked questions about how did you become a lawful permanent resident? What was that process like? And if for some reason, for instance, you misrepresented something on your lawful permanent resident residency application, and you actually weren't eligible for your green card, but you got away with it. Well, now at the naturalization stage, you could actually be denied citizenship and in a worst case lose your residency if that is found out. So you'll want to have you'll want to make sure, excuse me, that everything was done properly, right? So you have to have obtained that status as a resident lawfully. Um, and then there's two requirements that are quite similar in the law, but they are distinct. And those are the continuous residence requirement and the physical presence requirement. So, what are these and what do they mean for you? Well, the continuous residence requirement is that if you're applying for citizenship after 5 years as a lawful permanent resident, you have to have continuously resided in the United States for the last 5 years. So you'll want to have lived here, not spent more than 6 months at a time outside of the United States. Lots of folks who are lawful permanent residents, they know that, right? They know not to leave for more than 6 months at a time. If you do, again, you could actually abandon your residency, right? Because as a resident, you have permission to reside here in the U.S. You do not have permission to go live elsewhere as a resident, right? You're permanently residing in the U.S. So you'll want to have continuously resided here. And then there's the physical presence requirement, right? So that's a little bit different than the continuous resident requirement. You have to have been physically present for at least half of the time in the last 5 years. So, how is this different than the requirement I just mentioned? Well, someone might say, "Oh, I've never left for more than 6 months at a time. I've always heard that, and I know that I can't do that." Um, so I leave for 5 months, and then I come back and stay in the United States for 1 week, and then I go back to whatever other country for another 5 months, and then I come back for just 1 week, right? That's not going to work. You have to have, been physically present for over half the time. So if you're someone who's traveled a lot in the last 5 years, you might actually want to well, you will actually have to list out all of your trips on the N-400, the naturalization application, which we will get to, talking about that form. But you might actually want to count up those days, right? And see how many days, do some math. How many days have I actually spent outside the US? Is that requirement going to be an issue for me? And then you have to show what the immigration laws call good moral character. So you have to be a person of good moral character. What does that mean? Well, that we could do a whole other video diving into the complexities of the good moral character requirement. But if you're someone who has not filed your taxes for the last 5 years or has some significant criminal history over the last 5 years, those are going to be issues, right? Those are potential issues with your case. Depending on your specific circumstances, you might still be able to apply, but you'll definitely want to consult with a trusted immigration attorney to give you advice on whether you can apply now, whether you should actually wait a little bit until that, say, if it's criminal history is further behind you, once it's been, more years have gone by, or whether it actually doesn't make sense for you to apply for citizenship, and whether you should just continue to renew your permanent residency, renew your green card. Again, that's going to be case specific, a different analysis depending on what your history is, but you'll be asked lots of questions about, things you've done or not done. And so you'll want to make sure that you understand that requirement and make sure you're able to meet that so that there's no issues when you go to your naturalization interview. Next, let's talk about the process. What does it look like to apply for citizenship? Well, if you are a lawful permanent resident in the United States, you're likely familiar with the immigration process, and that there are lots of forms to fill out. So naturalization is no different. There is the form N-400, and that is the naturalization application, right? That's the form where you'll answer lots of questions about yourself and about your history. You'll be asked lots of yes or no questions, analyzing whether you do, in fact, have good moral character. Of course, it is imperative that you always, always, always answer honestly on any application you put before any immigration official in the United States. So make sure that you're answering everything correctly and honestly. And after you've submitted your application, you'll be asked to come in to an interview. At that interview, you will be asked questions about yourself. We mentioned you might be asked about, or sorry, I mentioned earlier, you might be asked about how you obtained your residency. The official will want to ensure there's no fraud at any part of your immigration background. If you have criminal history or other things, you'll be asked about that. If you have an attorney, they can either be there with you or, depending on the office, might be able to appear telephonically and join you over the phone to help you represent you at that interview. It's important to know that this interview for most people will be done in English, right? So the officer is going to be analyzing and evaluating your English language comprehension and speaking abilities throughout the interview. So again, that's for most people. If you're older, you've been in the United States as a lawful permanent resident for a long time, you might qualify for the English language exemption, where you can actually do the entire interview in your native language. So that seems like it might apply to you. Definitely look into that to make sure that you are taking the exam in your native language if you qualify, right? In addition to your English being evaluated throughout the exam, you'll also be asked to read and to write in English. So it's important that that you study and prepare so that you're ready for that part of the exam as well. And then you'll take the civics exam, right? So there's for most people, 100 questions that the officer will be able to choose from. And they'll ask you 10 of those questions, and you have to get 6 out of 10 correctly in order to pass. So, for most people, you find out at the interview whether you passed your exam, both the English and the civics, and whether the officer is able to approve your case. Sometimes, if there are issues with your case, the officer might say that they need more time or to have a supervisor review before they can approve. That doesn't mean your case will be denied, but it does mean that you don't have that kind of peace of mind of an approval the day of, right? Um, Lastly, it's very important to know that you are not yet a citizen until you go to your oath ceremony, right? This is where you pledge your loyalty to the United States in a formal ceremony. And this is depends on the office. It depends on where you're located within the United States. Sometimes we've had oath ceremonies the same day as the interview. I wouldn't say that that's the most common practice, but it does happen. Sometimes it's several weeks or months later. So you'll want to make sure that regardless of when it is, that you attend your oath ceremony and that you get your naturalization certificate. That is really, really important that you have that certificate so that you have the proof, right, that you are now a U.S. citizen. With that certificate, you can then get your passport and register to vote and all of that good stuff. So that I just said a lot of words and gave you a lot of information, but I hope that this was helpful. We love doing naturalization cases at Villafranca Law. It's a really exciting process for folks, especially lots of lawful permanent residents have been in the United States for a long time. They've been through the U.S. immigration system, which can be challenging, right? They've had lots of applications and done a lot of work to get to this point. So it really is a really special thing to get to help individuals go through this final part of the process and become U.S. citizens. So if you're interested in applying for naturalization, you're always welcome to reach out to me. My contact information is just here below. We'd love to chat with you further about your eligibility or answer any questions you might have about the process and to help you through this process to ensure that all goes smoothly. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Again, my name is Allison Gordon Wright. I'm one of the immigration attorneys at Villafranca Law. If you liked this video, if you found it helpful, we would love for you to subscribe to the Villafranca Law YouTube channel. We love to jump on here and give immigration legal advice. It's what we're passionate about. It's what we do full time, and we'd love to chat with you. Thanks so much.